Even though Concord only died a year ago, it feels like we've been talking about this game for years and years at this point. Every single time you think that there's nothing else going on with this title, something pops up. One day we're going to hear about the resurrection of it, I swear. But now a former Concord developer is lamenting the company didn't do any counter programming and allowed false narratives to spread. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, this game was an absolute nightmare. As somebody who actually played it during the 2 weeks that it was alive, yeah, it just didn't deserve to come out and really get as much coverage as it did. But of course, we love to point and laugh at major failures, and this was definitely one of them. One of the largest failures in the history of the video game industry right here, ladies and gentlemen. And even though it has just passed the 1 year mark since the servers were taken offline, we're still talking about it. But now, a former developer at Firewalk Studios who worked on Concord lamented that the company did not do any counter programming to combat the plethora of criticisms the game faced and declared that this allowed false narratives to spread. Now, it was just a terrible game all around. It did not deserve to have so much money and time and effort put into it. And really, I don't know what they were doing with the game. It had $500 million put into it, years and years worth of development. And I don't see why Sony went out of their way to purchase Firewalk. They really believed that this was going to be like the next big game on the block for people, that everyone was going to be talking about it and loving it. I mean, they went so far as to plan books, and they even had the secret level episode to try and hype up what we all assume was a new character release, and it just was a disaster all around. It was DEI top to bottom, right? They didn't actually put any thought into these character designs. They were like, well, what are the types of characters that people don't want to play as in games? And then they were like, yeah, let's greenlight all of these, which was a nightmare. The monetization model was really bizarre. The maps were really bad. Maybe they restarted development like a year and a half before release, and this is the best that they could come up with, but that would make absolutely no sense. And we've never heard that. It's just speculation. But in an interview on the A Life Well Wasted podcast, one of the developers shared, I think the most frustrating part about it to me was people had made up in their mind about the game, and I felt like it was based off of, and I think this is more our fault than theirs, we did a bad job of communicating what we were trying to do, and I felt like there was such a disconnect, and I just felt like if I could sit down with any individual that said something bad about this game and plead our case, I could convince them 100% to be on board with the game. It's just we did a terrible job of appealing to the mass of gamers, and it just didn't go too well. What's so funny about this is that literally any content creator on the face of the internet that was talking about this game would have been happy to sit down with these people. Now, I get that like Sony probably didn't want them talking too much about it, but there came a point where Sony probably should have realized, or maybe these people should have communicated it to Sony, that, hey, listen, we need to delay this game, take some real feedback into consideration, and maybe we can save it and actually show them maybe some statistics about online feedback. But even now, all this time later, they're going into interviews where they're just talking to somebody who's part of their echo chamber. It's not actually sitting down with someone like, I don't know, me or Stuttering Craig or somebody right in this space who could have a genuine discussion with them. No. They're still sitting here and not actually talking to the very people they're now bitching about. Another added, it's certainly unpleasant. It was incredibly frustrating that we didn't do any counter programming. That started immediately after the reveal of the game, and it was just total radio silence. So a lot of false narratives about the game got built, and it was outside of our control. You could still sit down and make posts on social media, and if you're going and talking about it now, this 1 year later, you could talk to anybody about it this 1 year later. Still, another added, we didn't really have a voice in the white noise, and I think that really damaged the game. I didn't know if we necessarily knew how to be that voice in the game. Firewalk Studios was a tiny little startup, suddenly having these daunting expectations put onto this game with a huge scope that I do not think we could have matched. I always think that this narrative is so funny. We saw it happening with Sweet Baby Inc. Oh, they're just a small team. It's not that serious. They don't have any control. Same thing with Collective Shout. Oh, they're just a small team. It's not that serious. They don't have that much control. Now they're saying, oh, Firewalk was a small team. Sony went out of their way to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to buy this studio, and they put hundreds of millions of more dollars into the game. In total, from according to reports and multiple sources, it cost $500 million in total. You guys aren't going to convince me that you're just, oh, this small little team that didn't have a lot of resources and this big, mean company was telling you what to do. First of all, you got paid. Second of all, you got a million opportunities. And third, again, let me say, you still could be talking with other people that criticize the game, and you're not doing that. They said, oh, this big game fails, and like, that's awesome. We got to see something crash and burn, and like, that's kind of great. That's really cool. And to be part of the process, it's really easy to bandwagon on that too. Like, well, we're punching up and not really taking into consideration that, like, well, you're punching up at that, but then all of these people that work really hard on it are not those people. It's just weird that there's this audience who's just constantly wanting to be excited that something fails. But the reality behind it is we're just looking at our keyboards and then we're like, oh, no job today. And that does suck that you got fired and you got laid off in like the span of just a couple of days, but ultimately you still got paid the amount that you were initially promised. And this whole entire article really highlights how little respect they have for gamers and also content creators. Like, I get that you are personally bothered by the fact that you worked on this for years and it ended up releasing and failing, but sometimes that just happens with projects. And most of the people that worked on Concord that we at least saw publicly bitching about the game and talking about their time working on this title were major activists. These are not people who were talented veterans in the industry who were actually good at their jobs. No, no, no. They're people who went into this with a narrative first mentality. Maybe if you just listened to gamers and you actually created a piece of content that was half fucking decent, it wouldn't have instantly died and people would have a different level of respect for you. But of course, it's at the bottom of a trash can because the way that you guys have acted, even now you're coming out saying, oh, there's just this audience of gamers who are laughing at the fact that something failed and they're excited to see something fail. Yeah, I mean, I know that sucks for you, but gamers are happy to see if something fails, if it goes against everything that we've been asking for. If it's not a good product, then why would we be happy that a bad product was ultimately rewarded? Like, that makes no sense whatsoever. There was one developer who had a different view and recognized that the game was unlikely to do well and had much of the same criticisms that the game faced, which I actually think is pretty good that there was a few people on this team who were kind of normal or like understood that the gaming sphere was not going to react positively to this game. And that's the issue that we face when it comes to games failing. There are always bound to be a few good apples in every bunch. If a game like Yote fails or if a game like Veilguard fails, sure, 95% of the people that are being fired are people we don't really care about, but there are always going to be a couple of individuals who are actually decent at their job, and it sucks to see them get hit and like wrapped up in the controversy. But at the same time, I just can't feel all too bad for people who, yeah, I mean, worked on a game for years, who got paid, and who just created something that people didn't like. Another developer admitted that the game was uncool but failed to explain why it got that reaction. They will do and say anything but take accountability and actually take our criticisms into account. They're not admitting that these designs were absolutely horrendous, that the cast of characters were basically just a DEI checklist, and that the game seemed like it had minimal effort put into it, but they'll say, oh, it's uncool, and then blame us for criticizing it, which is crazy. Of course, if you don't know, Firewalk Studio shut down Concord less than 2 weeks after it released, with game director Ryan Ellis announcing on the PlayStation blog, at the time, we have decided to take the game offline, beginning September 6th, 2024, and explore options, including including those that will better reach our players. And we haven't heard any news about any sort of revival or them potentially taking the game and adding a new coat of paint to it and trying to revive it. But it wouldn't shock me, given how much time and money really went into this. I don't really see them wanting to completely throw it away, but maybe they will. Either way, anything having to do with Concord has been the laughing stock of the video game industry over the past year. And when you have people that are this out of touch on your team, it's really no shocker to see why it failed. And instead of just admitting their wrongs and talking about why it failed, and really it boils down to them being untalented, they are going and blaming Sony, they are blaming gamers, and they are blaming content creators, and they are not actually looking in a mirror. So I'll be keeping my eye on the discussion surrounding Concord. Now that we're a year out from its death, there's a lot of talk about it and a lot of memes spreading across social media, but this game truly highlights why the AAA gaming industry is struggling so much right now, and all of these statements really show how out of touch these people really are. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this and found it important and informative, make sure to give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.